Welcome to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Badass Direct Sales Mastery is a podcast for rockstar direct sales moms who are determined to make their business kick ass. Jennie will share her knowledge of effective sales and recruiting techniques, tips to get what you want from your business, and will interview direct sales professionals and leaders from various companies. The interviews will give insight to how these rock stars got to where they are and where they plan to grow in the future. And now, the direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Direct Sales Mastery. I'm your host, your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger, helping you whip your business into shape. And today I have with me Jon Sneider. He is with Wild Gravity and actually is a marketing veteran, entrepreneur, leader, and pragmatist. As the recipient of multiple industry awards recognizing creativity, innovation, and business results, Jon has built a reputation as an expert in defining, promoting, and growing some of the largest brands in the world. And y'all, he was dropping some names beforehand, and some of them are my faves. I'm just saying, I'm super excited to talk to him today. He's an outdoor enthusiast and can typically be found on the ski slopes or in his camper exploring the great PNW and beyond. So I'm guessing that's Pacific Northwest.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Jennie. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, I am too, because we were introduced through a mutual friend, John Miller. And, once he told me about who you are and what you do and what you have coming up, I was like, okay, yeah, we definitely gotta get this guy in the show. So, but in the pre-interview, you and I were chatting and you were talking about how you got started in the business world in sales. So let's start there. How did you get started in the business world and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I started my career in the late 90s, just to date myself a little bit, I was looking for a quote unquote real job. And my first real job was selling Bose Wave radios over the phone. So
wow.
Literally, I was an outbound direct sales agent. And we used to make, 100 to 120 calls a day selling Wave radios to people that requested the information. And the surprising thing to me, I guess not that surprising, is I was pretty good at it.
Yeah?
I was pretty good at it. Yeah. And I did well enough. I got promoted to manager. They actually paid for me to get my MBA then, and that launched the rest of my career. And I ended up going into marketing and advertising, working through ad agencies, and then being the client for some huge brands running the agencies. But I'm very fond of saying that my grounding in sales has been the key to all of my success. And now I'm an entrepreneur and had a business for 8 years, and it's all about sales.
So you said in there that you were good at sales. What do you think made you a good salesperson?
I think asking a lot of questions and listening and responding rather than trying to just go right into a sales pitch. A lot of times, as you know, it's key to getting to the customer's actual wants, needs, and desires versus just selling them a product. A lot of times I could end up selling them something that was more expensive than the things they signed up for if I would just listen to what they were telling me.
And that's a big deal, especially because, Bose is a well-known, high-end speaker,
That's right.
audio system, right? Because it's something that, and especially back in the late 90s, that they were probably, filling out web forms or something, like early
That's
level.
right.
Is that how they were letting you know
actual,
that they
actual
wanted it?
paper brochures as well.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, and the items weren't cheap either. $350 for a radio is not cheap.
Yeah.
And then it was $1,000 for the next system up from there.
Nice. So yeah, so
Because
if you're, reaching out to people who filled out a form, whether online or a, actual paper brochure, so they've definitely taken the time to at least say, yes, I want some more information,
yeah,
reach out to me. That's a good first step. But what did you find helped you be able to, did you start out initially asking lots of questions, or was that something you learned to do over time through the
more the
process of
latter.
getting
It was
better?
something that I learned to do over time. As a newbie, I would come
Mhm.
in and just kind of launch right into the pitch. And
Oh,
it took a while to grow into the kind of consultative sales process.
Oh, I love that. Okay, good, because that's what I teach. Is
I,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because, it nothing drives me more crazy nowadays than getting, one of my good friends, Michael Whitehouse, calls being pitch slapped in the
I love that.
right
Yeah.
in my messenger, whether it's Facebook Messenger, LinkedIn Messenger, whatever. Someone reaches out to me because I've accepted a connection or they're doing the random reach outs and they just launch right into the sale. And I'm like, you don't even know me. You don't
Right.
know what my needs are. And that's usually what I respond with is, I imagine this is not very successful for you because frankly, you don't know me. You don't know what I need. You don't know
That's
whatever.
right.
You're just hoping that I'm part of the 3% that happens to be looking for your solution right now. But I'm going to tell you right now, you don't know me and I don't know you and I don't do business with people I don't know.
Yeah.
So if you want
The
to get
be-
to know me, let's have a conversation.
Absolutely. The best salespeople don't actually talk that much. They get you to talk.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've tried telling people that and they don't believe me.
It's absolutely true.
Right? It's such an interesting thing though, because one would think, right? The quote unquote common sense belief around that would be, well, if I talk more, they're going to know more and they're going to want to buy it.
Right. But then it's just a blind features benefits presentation. And again, if you don't know what their actual needs are, you might be pitching to somebody that has no real interest or need for it.
Yeah, exactly. So starting in sales, then you moved into marketing and advertising. How did that sales experience inform your transition into marketing and advertising?
Well, I mean, as you know, like sales is a part of every part of business. And then I was an account person starting out at one of the largest interactive agencies starting in 2000. And, as an account person, there's a lot of sales. You're trying to grow the account, you're trying to pitch them to take on new programs and new investments. And then in general, just if you're in a career, you're in a mode where you're constantly selling yourself and you've got to sell initiatives to your boss and you've got to sell yourself as the person that's capable of pulling things off, right? So sales has absolutely been a part of every part of my career. And I don't think I would be as successful as I am if I didn't have that grounding in sales. And I just am so fond of salespeople overall. And I feel like salespeople a lot of times get a bad rap, but I love great salespeople.
Oh yeah. I regularly when I'm doing talks about sales and things like that will tell the story of Rick, the guy who sold me like my first car as an adult, right?
Yeah,
And the reason I still know his name is because he was a great consultative salesperson and he continued sending me cards on the anniversary of the purchase of
right,
my first vehicle as a whole ass human being, grown as an adult woman. Because I was like, this was like he knew that I was very trepidatious about my first largest purchase, right?
right, right,
And but he didn't try to show me things that weren't what I wanted. He could have, because of my age, said, oh, well, because you're this age, you should probably be looking at this kind of sports car or this kind of this because you're in your 20s and blah, blah, blah. No, no, no.
right,
Rick listened. He asked questions. He knew that I was about to get married and that I wanted, a vehicle that would serve me having children and be large enough because for people who don't know, I'm 5'10" barefoot. So I'm tall, and my soon-to-be husband at the time was 6'4", is 6'4". He's still around, but we're not married anymore. But that's a whole other conversation.
gotcha.
So he knew we couldn't fit in some dinky little sports car. That was not going to be a fit because he
Right.
asked the questions,
Yeah,
right? And
that's
he was
right.
also smart enough to talk to me because it was my car, not my fiance's car.
Smart. Yeah,
So salespeople talk to the person who's doing the decision making. Just saying.
good insight. Yeah, I mean, I just bought a new truck and I bought it from Johnny Wynn, and that's the fourth vehicle I've purchased from him. And he remembers our family, asked me questions about my wife, my kids. Like, we have a history now. And when I want something new, I'm just going to go straight to Johnny because of that.
Yeah. And there's a loyalty belt. Absolutely. So now going into, because sales is absolutely necessary for a business, because otherwise, with no sales, you don't have a business, right?
Right. I like
Um,
saying there's no biz without biz dev.
right? Business development, sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And business development is a new term for sales, y'all.
that's right.
But along that is the marketing and advertising piece. And there's a lot of people who confuse and conflate sales and marketing and advertising as all one thing when really those are three very separate things,
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
So, how would you say, what would you say is a great way to help people understand a marketing piece that's going to help them get more sales conversations?
Well, I mean, in one way, marketing is sales on a one to many basis, right?
Yeah.
Rather than one on one, it's one to many. And then in that case, I mean, it's certainly harder to listen to people when you're sending out a piece of marketing, but a great piece of marketing will inspire a conversation and will get people to take that next step. And in that way, it's very similar. But and then, marketing is a lot more about that feature benefits presentation and you're hoping to again drive that conversation so somebody actually wants to engage.
Yeah. So in the marketing piece, yes, there's features and benefits, but do you also, or is this more on the advertising side, be able to talk about those outcomes that come from purchasing that product or investing in that service?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best advertising is very targeted, and you'll notice, like, you know are you a small business owner, are you a plumber, are you a lawyer, are you a podcast host,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
then right, and so they're speaking to you, they're starting the conversation then, and you're like, okay, you do know me a little bit, right?
hmm
So right, in that way, that's the conversation starter.
Right. And I think the important piece that I want to point out to the person who's listening to this right now and how this applies to their business is, so many people who are in sales, especially direct sales and network marketing, will say, well, yeah, but my product is beneficial to everyone and anyone. But if you're not marketing and advertising to that very specific person who has that very specific problem, they're not even going to want to reach out, or
Right.
even that marketing and advertising isn't going to speak to them.
Yep. They're going to scroll by if it's online. They're going to tune out if they're watching TV or listening to the radio or podcast if it doesn't speak to them.
Yeah. So, I have a very specific avatar that I speak to. And every time I'm working with my AI assistant, her
Right.
name is Moxie, because we came up with a name for her because I felt weird just calling it ChatGPT all the time.
Right.
But whenever I'm working with Moxie, I'm talking to her when I'm creating certain things about Evelyn, that we've
Sure.
co-created
Right.
this avatar of who my ideal client is, the perfect person that I want to work with all the time, right? And what
Right.
she is. So that way when I'm creating social media, when I'm creating resources for people, I'm really speaking to that person. And yeah, other people get benefit, but there's
Yeah.
that.
I mean, great marketing departments spend time doing exactly what you do and they develop personas. And then what's become more commonplace now is to develop an ICP, an ideal customer profile, right? And it's pretty
Mhm.
much the same thing, right?
Yeah,
And then that helps you to zero in so that you're landing the right messages that are specific to that ideal client, ideal customer.
I love that. And I have so many questions that are already like trying to bombard me on this. So let's get into the advertising piece, because that's an area where not a lot of network marketers are necessarily doing themselves.
Right.
Or if they are, they're maybe boosting a post or something like
Sure.
that. So can we start talking about the advertising piece, and at what point is it beneficial for a solopreneur to get into an advertising campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up through the advertising and marketing world. I worked for some big agencies working on big accounts like General Motors and AT&T and T and Microsoft and Turner Networks that became Time Warner. And then I got recruited by some big clients. I was head of digital advertising at Fidelity Investments. And then I was head of advertising all up for LL Bean for Windows at Microsoft and
Wow.
for Redfin. And what I found is that working with ad agencies was very cumbersome, expensive, and slow.
Mm.
And at the time when I was actually at Windows, it was, in 2009, Facebook started in 2007, and the needs were changing from developing advertising for broadcast to having to get videos out quickly for social media and for digital. And the advertising agencies were too big and slow to do that. So I started developing some smaller vendors, some people, it was basically, it'd be a guy with a camera or a very small shop, and it was people that would do it all. The problem with that is they lack the brand sophistication and a lot of the things that you do get from the agency, which add value. So, you know, it would be like you're using the wrong logo. We don't say it that way. All this type of stuff
Oh, yeah.
that put the agency onus on you. And so this is leading up to when I started my own shop, Wild Gravity. The idea was to fill that gap in between the huge agency and the smaller shop without the brand sophistication. And what we do is we help people develop great advertising without the middleman. So this is the way that you can develop great creative at a far, far lower cost that is much faster, and it's usually better because you're
Mm.
dealing with less people and there's less of a game for television. So if you're a solopreneur, a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small and medium business owners, they don't even want to go the advertising route because they think that they need to hire an ad agency. And, they know that agencies are expensive for one,
Yeah.
and that they're also usually big and slow. But there is a way, if you are a solopreneur, to develop great advertising without that time, hassle, and cost. And it's working with a creative production company or working with, a company like Wild Gravity. And the key thing that we do is a lot of people that aren't in the ad industry don't know this, but the ad agencies don't actually create the ads. They think of the ads,
Hmm.
they create the concepts, they create the campaign concepts, but when it's time to film the spots, they farm the work out to a production company. Now, a production company has the producers, the directors, is going to hire the camera people, the key grips, all of the lighting people, the gaffers, all of that stuff. And so now you're dealing with two vendors. And then after the spots are filmed, then it goes to a third vendor, which is a post production company. And they're going to do all of the editing and sound design and things of that nature. And then after that, it's going to go to a fourth company, which is a visual effects company. And they're going to do all of your supers. If there is any effects, they'll do that, of course. They're also, if you have something with a screen, like a computer, you're selling software, they actually put the screens in post production because the machines are shot with the screens off with green screen so that a VFX artist can put the screens in afterwards. So if you're a company, if you're a solopreneur, that's a lot of vendors. And
Yeah.
that's going to add a lot of cost and a lot of complexity. And what's different about creative production agencies like ours is that we have all of those things under the same roof. We have agency creative services, production, post production, and visual effects all under the same roof. And so companies are able to slash ad production costs by up to 70%. And
Wow.
we can do it at a fraction of the speed. Something that will take the agency months, we can pull off in a couple of weeks. And the other thing is people can work with us directly. So they enjoy the process more. And as a result of all of that, they get better creative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's really the key because if you think about it, most of the year, most people do not enjoy watching ads,
that's right.
right? But there's one day of the year where
Yeah,
everybody literally, if you're not watching the Super Bowl, there are people who watch the Super Bowl for the sheer sake of watching the ads because they're not into football. They don't care about who's running around in tight tights with big helmets on. They don't care about that part. They want to watch the ads because those are the most, I think, some of the most creative ads that are created all year.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. For sure, the Super Bowl is the Super Bowl of advertising as well. And companies pull out all the stops, they use huge budgets, and usually there's some really entertaining creative.
Yeah. And so the cool thing is though nowadays with where we are in the world and in the world of business, those kinds of ads can be done now at a much smaller scale for not millions of dollars, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, honestly, Doritos kind of like led the way in that, and having a contest to have people make the ads themselves and send them in.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's insane. But so what comes to mind for me in terms of, you know, a creative ad that was not put out for the Super Bowl, at least I don't think it ever was the poopery stuff. But they went viral through like YouTube and social media because they had a very creative ad that still to this day, sticks in my mind when I think about creative advertisements that were made that then created a bunch of sales for them without having to have sales calls because people just went and clicked a button and went, that's really unique and I want that product, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So with creative advertising, what would you say is probably the most fun you've had in creating an advertisement for a client? And you don't necessarily have to name them per se, but giving an idea of like what that process was like.
Yeah, when we were working with the giant agency at Windows and I started developing some smaller vendors, we got to work with the Broken Lizard troupe, and they are an improv group, and a lot of people know them because they wrote Super Troopers and starred in Super Troopers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so we came to them and we're like, we have these three ideas for ads. Will you make them? And they were like, we'll absolutely do that. And they were just like what I was talking about. They were super collaborative. They did it all themselves. And so we just had a fantastic time. And like, as funny as they are in the movies, they're that funny when you're hanging out with them in real life. So that was an absolute blast and probably my favorite campaign. That's the other thing, is that campaign did better than the work that we did with our huge advertising agency. And we
Wow.
paid a fraction of the cost, and
Right.
it was done faster. And again, it was better.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it
Just
was a
getting to
blast.
work with improv people because I'm a yes and kind of girl anyway.
Right. Oh,
So
yeah. It's all about yes and. That's a
right?
rule in our company. Like when we have meetings, you're like, you have to be yes and. There's no
Yes.
buts. Yeah,
Oh, exactly. Because the but just negates everything that came out before that word leaves your mouth. So
that's absolutely true.
oh, I love that. So you have, because we've been talking about advertising, then you've just come out with a book and it's already hit number one in a variety of places and categories and things like that, called Hacking Advertising. Tell me more about the book.
Yeah, the book is called Hacking Advertising: How We Learned to Make Great Advertising Without the Agency, and You Can Too. And
Ooh.
so it's all about how you can skip the agency and develop great advertising creative either on your own with a partner with a creative production company. And it was released on Tuesday, and it's the number one new release in three categories and a bestseller in five categories, which is so rewarding after this long, long journey to get it into market, to write the book and get it into market. But yeah, it's out there for anybody that wants a peek behind the curtains on the way that the ad industry works. And then particularly it hones in on what is broken, what's not working in the
Mm.
ad industry, and then how you can fix it, how you can skip all that and go direct to production and save yourself a ton of money and make more effective advertising.
I think that's so super cool. Well, we are going to put the link to the book for any of our badass crew who is interested in checking this book out because, you may as well. If you're thinking about advertising, depending on where you are in your business and you're thinking of doing something more than just boosting a post, but actually creating something that may get people's attention and may actually get you somewhere with some effectiveness, you should talk to the guy or read the book of the guy who has done the ads for Windows, LL Bean, and GM and on, right? That's such a great list there. Yeah, I think it'd be a really smart thing for people to do is to check out that book. So, of course, my badass crew, they already know to go to the show notes to click the link. For everybody else, if this just happens to be your first time listening because you wanted to know about how to advertise your business and you've never listened to the show before, all you have to do is grab your phone, as long as you're not driving, click on today's episode, scroll under Jon's picture, and there you will see the link to Hacking Advertising. And go ahead and grab your copy to be able to learn more about advertising and how you can have a creative advertising campaign without the big ad agency if you don't want to. And Jon, this has been such a great conversation, a nice deep dive into sales, marketing, and advertising. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out to you to maybe connect with you and learn more about what you do at Wild Gravity, or maybe even just thank you for the aha moment that they had today, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. People can reach out to me at Wild Gravity. We're at wildgravity.net. And then the book is available through my website, which is hackingadvertising.com. And people can reach out there. I see every message and I respond to every single message that I get. And then if people want to just go get the book, just search Hacking Advertising on Amazon.
Perfect. I love it. So everybody, badass crew, please, gratitude is the highest frequency out there and a great way to bring more wonderful information your way. So please reach out to Jon if you found some benefit from today and let him know that you appreciated his expertise, experience, and knowledge here on the show. Jon, thank you for being here.
Jennie, it was so fun. I love this conversation.
Good. I'm so glad. And of course, badass crew, you know how it goes. Stay tuned because there's another badass episode on its way.
Thanks for listening to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Why are you waiting to go to badassdirectsalesmastery.com? Don't make the dom get her whip. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with another rock star that you know in direct sales after you subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. You can also check out the show notes for links and any contact information mentioned in today's episode. We'll see you next time.